Hi all, welcome to our database programming with PLSQL final pair project, the Student Administration Database, done by Jalu Chadban and myself, Shellyan Husbands. This project utilized a case study called Student Administration. A set of database tables were used to manage a school course offerings delivered by instructors in many classes over time. Information was stored about the classes offered, the students who took the classes, and the grades the students received on various assignments. This project incorporated our knowledge of anonymous blocks, procedures, functions, packages, and triggers which we use to support the operations of the small school. The following shows an anonymous PLSQL block that enrolls a student in a particular class. It uses the enrollment table and accepts a student ID and class ID as input parameters. It uses today's date for the enrollment date and the string enrolled for the status.
So now let's run the code and see what happens. So now we are going to add student 107 to class 14.
The following shows an anonymous block that drops a student from a class. It uses the enrollment table and accepts a student ID and class ID as input parameters. It also includes code to confirm the student and the class IDs of the drop.
So let's run the code and see what happens. After entering the parameters, as you can see, student ID 107 and class ID 14 was removed from the enrollment table.
The following shows an anonymous block that displays all of the classes a student has been enrolled in within the most recent 10 years. For example, if you run your program on May 10, 2010, you should display all enrollments between May 10, 2000 and May 10, 2010. It accepts the student ID as an input parameter, and for each enrollment, it displays the enrollment date, class ID, and status.
So now let's run the code and see what happens. As you can see in the enrollment table, student ID 104 enrolled two times, once in 2004 and then 2020. But the issue is that they asked for 10 years, and 2004 to 2020 is 16 years. So that's why you only saw one result.
The following anonymous block adds n new classes for a particular course. It accepts the following in parameters: number of new classes required, set a default value of 1, course ID for each new class, use today's date as the start date, period to specify what days the class meets, frequency to specify how often it meets, and instructor ID to show who is teaching the class.
So let's run the code. The two classes that we added came up as class ID 16 and 17.
The following anonymous block can be used to see the students in a course across all classes of that course. It accepts the instructor ID and course ID as input parameters, and for each enrollment it displays the class ID, status, student's first name, and
So let's run the code.
The following is an anonymous block that converts a number grade to a letter grade. It prompts the user for a number grade and then displays a char value back to the screen. It uses the following rules: A is 90 or above, B is greater than or equal to 80 but less than 90, C is greater than or equal to 70 but less than 80, D is greater than or equal to 60 but less than 70, and F is less than 60. The following anonymous block displays the number of students in a particular class. It accepts a class ID as a parameter. The following anonymous block can be used to insert a new assignment, including its description. It uses the assessment underscore ID underscore sequence to generate the class assessment ID. Block can be used to insert a student's grade on a particular assignment. It accepts a numeric grade, class assessment ID, class ID, and student ID, and uses today's date for the date turned in. Part 3. Schools Administrators Tools. Autonomous block lists any enrollments which have neither a final numeric grade or a final letter grade. It accepts a start date and end date to establish a date range and only displays enrollment between those two dates. If both dates are not entered, it displays all applicable enrollments for the past year and includes a note about the date range. The following autonomous block finds the average for a class. Assuming the class has used a numeric grade, it accepts a class ID and then displays the average grade. The following autonomous block displays the number of classes offered for a given course. The following function accepts a class ID as an in parameter and returns the number of students in that particular class. The phone utilizes the overloading feature of the PLSQL package to overload the student class list procedure as follows. When the student ID parameter is passed, the procedure should display a list of classes in which the student has been enrolled within the most recent 6 years. Or when the procedure is called without a parameter, the procedure should display a list of the classes for all students in which they have been enrolled within the most recent 6 years. The following row level trigger keeps a history of all the changes made to the student's final letter grade. The grade change is recorded every time the final letter grade is updated in the enrollments table. Every time the trigger is fired, it inserts a record in the grade change history table, recording the old grade and the new grade for each student.